Hello, everyone. Welcome to Anime Dreams, your go-to channel for exciting anime discussions and fanfiction explorations. Today, we're diving into another thrilling installment of our fanfic series. What if Naruko was born in Uchiha? Part 4. Disclaimer: this content is purely for entertainment and discussion purposes. I do not own any of the anime footage featured in this video. Full credit goes to the original creators and copyright holders. Without further ado, let's jump right in. Naruko walked through her home, pausing in front of a room that stirred deep emotions every time she passed it. She hadn't stepped inside since the night she learned of Shisui's passing. No matter how much time had passed, she couldn't bring herself to cross that threshold. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob, only to let it fall away at the last moment. A few silent tears slipped down her cheeks as she shut her eyes tightly. Suddenly, a gentle hand grasped hers, and another rested just above her elbow in a comforting embrace. She had thought she was the only one awake. It was, after all, 2 a.m. Sleep rarely came easily these days, so she often trained in the backyard, the dojo, or the forest to clear her mind. But with Sasuke staying in the guest room, she didn't want to disturb her or leave her alone in the house. This was his room, wasn't it? Sasuke asked softly. Yeah. Without another word, Sasuke leaned her head against Naruko's shoulder. The quiet understanding between them conveyed more than words ever could. She was there, offering her unwavering support. Taking a deep breath, Naruko turned the doorknob and stepped inside. Sasuke stayed by her side, matching her pace. The room remained untouched, as if frozen in time. Everything was neatly arranged, though a thin layer of dust had settled over the past year and a half. It was clear that the space had been well cared for. As she walked through the room, Naruko's gaze fell on framed photographs of her and Shisui. She picked one up, pressing her index and middle fingers lightly over Shisui's image. Hey, Naruko? There are some notes on his desk, Sasuke pointed out. Naruko's eyes widened in surprise as she approached the desk. He was working on a new genjutsu. But he never got to finish it. What kind of technique was he developing? From what I can tell, he was trying to create a genjutsu inspired by something he called Koto Amatsukami. That technique allows the user to subtly influence someone's thoughts, making them believe an idea was their own. This, however, seems to be a different approach. He was working on a technique that would trap someone in an illusion so overwhelming that their mind would break under the pressure. Sasuke frowned. Did he ever complete it? Naruko shook her head. No. His notes mention that he was struggling to refine it. He was still searching for a way to perfect it. She exhaled deeply. But now. You should finish it, Sasuke encouraged. I'm sure he'd be proud if you could find the solution he was looking for. Honestly, if anyone could complete his work, it's you. I've never seen someone pick up techniques as quickly as you do. Maybe you're right. I know I'm right, Sasuke said with a small smile. Naruko chuckled softly before wrapping an arm around her, pulling her close as she gently rubbed her arm. Thank you, Sasuke-chan. For the next 2 days, they dedicated themselves to rigorous training. Sasuke successfully mastered the Uchiha style, Dance of the Sun Halo, refining her movements with precision and grace. Naruko, meanwhile, fully perfected the Sunshine technique, allowing her to make rapid movements in quick succession, enhancing her agility in battle. The next challenge was an advanced form of the teleportation jutsu, a technique that Shisui had once mastered to such an extent that he could create after-image clones. It was a skill requiring immense speed and precision. Where Shisui could produce 16 afterimages, Naruko could only manage 2. She still had work to do, her speed wasn't quite there yet, and she required a few hand seals to perform it, whereas Shisui could execute it instantly. Despite that, her overall speed had improved significantly, extending beyond just her Sunshine. While she wasn't yet at a Jonin's level in natural speed, she was easily as fast, if not faster, than most Chunin. Training under one of the fastest shinobi in history, and being the daughter of the fastest, had certainly worked in her favor. Sasuke was impressed by Naruko's skill and finally asked to learn Sunshine herself. Naruko happily taught her, though it became clear that Sasuke wouldn't reach the same level of mastery. While she could use it for basic transportation like most shinobi, she lacked the sheer speed and fluid control that Naruko possessed. Still, she was satisfied. Being able to move from point A to point B with greater efficiency was all she truly needed. Eventually, it was time for Sasuke to return home. She bid farewell to Naruko, grateful for their time together. In turn, Naruko appreciated her unexpected visit. It had lifted her spirits more than she could express. She was lucky to have a friend like Sasuke. Little did they know, Sasuke would soon need Naruko's support more than ever. A revelation was on the horizon, one that would shake her world to its core. "Oi, Naruko." "Hello, Uncle Kakashi. Is there something I can do for you?" Naruko asked as she stood up from her seat. "What have you been up to?" Kakashi inquired. "Oh, nothing much. Sasuke-chan was here earlier, you just missed her. She's been a great help these past few days while she stayed over." Kakashi raised an eyebrow and chuckled. "You two spent a few days together alone?" "Yeah? Why?" Naruko asked, tilting her head in confusion. "Oh, nothing," Kakashi replied with an amused tone. "It'll be a few years before you fully understand." He chuckled to himself. "Okay," Naruko said, shaking off her curiosity. "Anyway, I finally mastered the Sunshine technique and started working on the final step of Shisui's most advanced teleportation jutsu." "Impressive. How far along are you?" "I can create 2 clones, but I still need to complete a few hand signs," Naruko said, a hint of frustration in her voice. Kakashi nodded thoughtfully. "You're making great progress, Naruko. I'm proud of you. But be careful not to make the same mistakes I did at your age. I became so consumed with my training after my father's passing that I shut myself off from everyone. Then, after the war, I withdrew even more. Remember, you're only about to turn 7. Try to enjoy your childhood as well." He knelt down to meet her at eye level, his tone filled with genuine concern. Naruko hesitated before looking down. "I understand, uncle. But if I'm not training, my thoughts start to wander, and it's painful. It scares me." Kakashi's expression softened. "Why does it scare you, Naruko?" She hesitated, then whispered, "I hear a voice sometimes. And I feel an urge to do things I know I shouldn't. But when I train, it fades away, and I can finally relax." Tears welled up in her eyes as she spoke. Kakashi's gaze darkened with concern. "Naruko," he murmured. His mind raced. "Is it the Kyuubi? The Sharingan? I did see her Mangekyo awaken. Shisui had Minato-sensei, and I had him too. But Naruko doesn't have anyone like that. Now I understand why Lord Third asked me to watch over her. What should I do?" Naruko's voice wavered as she wiped her eyes. "The academy starts soon, and I won't be able to train as much. I don't know how to handle this. I'm scared." Kakashi placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to go through this alone, Naruko. I'll be here for you. Whenever you need to talk, you can always come to me." Naruko shook her head. "How could you possibly understand? Ever since my Sharingan awakened, everything feels heavier. It amplifies my emotions, and it's overwhelming." Kakashi sighed and slowly lifted his headband, revealing his own Sharingan. Naruko's eyes widened in shock. She had always assumed he simply had a scar or had lost his eye, never did she expect him to possess the same power. "I do understand, Naruko," Kakashi said gently. "And that's why I can help you." For the first time since Shisui's passing, Naruko felt like someone truly understood her. Itachi had been there for her, but after Shisui was gone, things were never quite the same. While she still trained with Sasuke often, she had never fully opened up about how she felt, always assuming no one would understand. Without hesitation, she stepped forward and embraced Kakashi, letting out the emotions she had kept bottled up. Kakashi held her, silently promising himself that he would do everything in his power to support her. After a moment, he pulled away and stood up. "How about a spar, Naruko? I'll even use my Sharingan, I want to see how much you've grown." Naruko wiped her eyes and gave a small, determined smile. "All right." As they prepared to spar, Hiruzen observed them through his crystal ball, a faint smile on his face. He was relieved to see that Kakashi had been able to ease some of Naruko's inner turmoil. However, he knew it would take much more time and effort to truly help her overcome the darkness she struggled with. She had learned extensively about the Uchiha from her mentors, Hashirama Senju, the first Hokage, and Tobirama Senju, the second Hokage. Additionally, her friend and teammate, Kagami Uchiha, had provided valuable insight. She understood that the Uchiha possessed an unparalleled capacity for love, but with it came an equally intense potential for strong emotions. These two sides were inseparable, and Uchiha needed something or someone to love deeply, as it served as the anchor that kept their emotions balanced. However, if they lost what they cherished most, it often led them down a path of despair. The most well-known example of this was Madara Uchiha. After the loss of his beloved brother, he struggled with overwhelming grief, which eventually consumed him. While it was possible to overcome such emotions, it required immense resilience and the presence of unwavering support in an Uchiha's life. At this moment, Naruko needed as much stability as possible, especially since the Kyuubi within her naturally amplified her negative emotions. Additionally, she had become the youngest person to awaken the Mangekyo Sharingan, even if she had not yet mastered its activation at will. Hiruzen suspected that once Naruko learned about the tragedy of the Uchiha clan and the rumors surrounding Itachi and Shisui, she would likely awaken it again. The challenge, however, was that the Mangekyo Sharingan functioned on an entirely different level compared to the basic Sharingan. Without proper guidance, it would be incredibly difficult for her to navigate its complexities alone. With the Uchiha clan nearly gone and the only other known Mangekyo user forced into exile, Hiruzen felt deeply concerned. How would Naruko develop under these circumstances? Was there anything that could be done to help her? Unfortunately, Itachi had his own path to follow, one that prevented him from stepping in. Hiruzen wished he had a clear solution, but he didn't. Soon, Sasuke would learn the truth about her clan, and she would inevitably turn to Naruko for support. At the very least, their strong bond provided some reassurance. Even so, the weight of everything that had transpired saddened Hiruzen. He was determined to do his best to improve the situation, no matter how difficult it seemed. Should I tell Naruko about my own Mangekyo? Kakashi pondered. No. I'll wait until she activates it again. There was little point in revealing it now, especially since she had yet to fully unlock its abilities. It was probably best to keep that knowledge from her for as long as possible. Later that night, after bidding farewell to Kakashi, Naruko made her way home. The sky had darkened, and exhaustion settled over her. Through their training, she had quickly come to realize just how formidable Kakashi was. She never believed she could win, but she had hoped to hold her own, especially considering that Kakashi wasn't as fast as Shisui. Maybe that would give her a chance to keep up. No. That wasn't the case. Her Sharingan allowed her to perceive his movements, but that didn't mean she could react in time. The Sharingan granted enhanced perception, but not physical speed. Seeing an attack coming was one thing, being fast enough to counter it was another. If she couldn't match his speed, all she could do was watch herself struggle in slow motion. It frustrated her, but she understood that sparring with someone of Kakashi's caliber was the best way to improve. If she continuously trained against elite opponents, facing those at her actual level would feel much easier in comparison. That didn't change the fact that she had taken quite a few hits. Kakashi was likely the strongest jonin in the village, and the proof of that was in the countless bruises covering her body. She hadn't endured a fight like that since the time she upset Shisui and learned firsthand why he was called Shisui the Teleporter. Naruko was pulled from her thoughts when she noticed Sasuke sitting on her porch. That was unusual. Sasuke had left earlier, so why was she back? Had she forgotten something? Then, Naruko saw her face. There was an unmistakable sadness in Sasuke's expression, and the moment Naruko noticed the tears in her eyes, her heart sank. Without hesitation, she rushed to her side. "Hey, Sasuke-chan, what's wrong?" she asked gently, placing a comforting hand on Sasuke's shoulder. When Sasuke looked up at her, Naruko felt a deep ache in her chest. Seeing her in pain like this was unbearable. More than anything, she wanted to see her friend happy. She remained silent, struggling to find the words. Without hesitation, Naruko wrapped her arms around her in a comforting embrace, gently rubbing her back and stroking her hair. Sasuke leaned into the hug, and they stood there for several minutes as she wept into Naruko's shoulder. Naruko didn't speak, she simply held her, offering silent support. Once Sasuke began to calm down, Naruko guided her inside and seated her on the couch before heading to the kitchen to prepare some peach tea. Returning, she sat beside Sasuke, saying nothing, simply holding her hand and waiting patiently for her to speak when she was ready. Concern gnawed at Naruko. She feared something had happened to Sasuke's family, perhaps her parents, or worse, her brother. She had always admired and respected Itachi, looking up to him as a role model. The idea that something terrible might have occurred unsettled her deeply. But she didn't want to assume the worst. Still, she couldn't think of anything else that could cause Sasuke this much distress. After a long pause, Sasuke tightened her grip on Naruko's hand and looked up, her dark eyes filled with sorrow. She hesitated, but then, with a shaky breath, she finally spoke. "The clan. They're gone," she whispered. Naruko's eyes widened, but before she could respond, Sasuke continued. "They're saying that Itachi was the one who did it. That he was the one who..." Her voice trembled. "My parents, my cousins. Everyone." Fresh tears streamed down her face as she broke down once more. Naruko didn't say a word. Instead, she pulled Sasuke close again, holding her tightly as she cried into her chest. Naruko fought back her own emotions, refusing to let her sorrow show. Sasuke needed her to be strong. In that moment, she made a silent promise, she would always be her source of comfort, her light in the darkness. No matter how much pain she carried, she would never let Sasuke see her falter. "I'm so sorry, Naruko," Sasuke whispered. "The Anbu think. They think my brother might have." She hesitated before continuing. "They believe he faked Shisui-san's passing. That he may have." Her voice broke. "They say he did it for power." Naruko froze. She felt her body tense, her mind racing. The words echoed in her head, but she couldn't process them. Itachi, someone she had admired, trusted, was being accused of something unimaginable. Sasuke noticed her reaction and immediately feared the worst. Was Naruko angry? Did she now resent her because of what her brother had done? She had already lost her entire family, she couldn't bear the thought of losing Naruko too. "And Naruko? Do you hate me?" she asked hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. Naruko's grip tightened around her, snapping out of her daze. "No. I could never hate you, Sasuke-chan," she reassured softly. Sasuke's tears fell even harder, but this time, there was a sense of relief mixed with her sorrow. She didn't know what she would have done if Naruko had pushed her away. In this moment, Naruko was the only person she had left, the only one who truly understood. Exhaustion soon overtook her, and she drifted off to sleep in Naruko's arms. Gently, Naruko lifted her in a bridal carry and took her to the guest room, laying her down carefully and pulling the blanket over her. She softly wiped away the dried tears on Sasuke's cheeks, brushing a few strands of hair from her face. As she gazed at her sleeping form, Naruko's heart ached. Just as she turned to leave, she felt a weak tug on her wrist. "Please. Don't go," Sasuke mumbled sleepily. "Will you stay with me?" A warm smile crossed Naruko's face. "Of course," she whispered. She sat down in a chair beside the bed, allowing Sasuke to hold onto her hand. It wasn't long before Sasuke fully drifted into peaceful slumber, her grip on Naruko's hand loosening slightly. Only then did Naruko finally let her own emotions surface. Silent tears streamed down her face as she stared blankly at the floor. The betrayal, the confusion, the grief, it was all too much. She had looked up to Itachi, admired him. How could this be true? How could he have done something so terrible? Her mind raced with questions she couldn't answer. Why? How? What had led him to this path? Her emotions swirled into something she couldn't quite describe. Then, a sudden sensation surged through her. Her eyes snapped open, burning with intensity. She brought her fingers to her face, feeling the warmth radiating from them. Turning to a nearby mirror, she gasped. Her Sharingan had changed. The pattern was different, 6 black triangles connecting at their bases to form a hexagon in the center, surrounded by a dark ring. The deep crimson glow of her irises pulsed with newfound strength. She could feel it. This power was unlike anything before. Her vision was sharper, clearer, more profound. And within these eyes, she could sense even greater abilities hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be unlocked. Clenching her fists, she stared into her own reflection. With these eyes, I will find the truth. I will bring peace to this world, she thought determinedly. Her gaze shifted to Sasuke, who remained asleep, her face calm and untroubled for the first time in hours. Sasuke-chan, I promise. With these eyes, I will always protect you. No one will take you away from me. No one will ever hurt you again. And with that silent vow, Naruko steeled herself for the path ahead. Hiruzen observed everything through his crystal ball, feeling relieved that they supported one another. He was grateful that Naruko had not succumbed to resentment, thanks to the presence of her close companion. However, his concern for Naruko deepened when he witnessed her fully activating the Mangekyo Sharingan. The promise she made was both reassuring and worrisome. While he was hopeful that Sasuke could be the key to keeping her grounded, he also feared what would happen if Sasuke were ever in danger. How would Naruko respond? It reminded him of Itachi, who had once vowed to protect Naruko and Sasuke at any cost. If Naruko harbored the same determination, it was a daunting thought. At least with Itachi, he was always composed and in control of his emotions. But Naruko possessed the Kyuubi, and if she ever lost control, the consequences could be devastating. What should I do? Hiruzen pondered. He needed to speak with Kakashi and hear his thoughts. Right then, he made a firm decision: when Naruko became a shinobi, Kakashi would be her mentor. His Sharingan could potentially help suppress the Kyuubi's power, and his knowledge of sealing techniques would provide an additional safeguard. Previously, he had only considered the idea, believing that Naruko's own training with the Sharingan would suffice. But given the current circumstances, it was no longer just an option, it was a necessity. Sasuke would naturally be on the same team, as she needed guidance in awakening and mastering her own Sharingan. Moreover, she might be the one who could help Naruko stay balanced if her emotions ever wavered. Now, all that remained was to select a third member when the time came for their graduation. 2 months later. The first day of the academy had finally arrived. A great deal had transpired in the past 2 months. Sasuke had moved into Naruko's home, as she could no longer bring herself to stay in her own house. She was immensely grateful when Naruko invited her to stay, sensing her reluctance to return. Naruko had noticed the sorrow in her eyes that morning and understood without words that she no longer wished to be alone in that space. Now, Sasuke occupied the room beside Naruko's and had been training with her daily in preparation for the academy. Thanks to Naruko's support, the overwhelming grief she once felt had lessened. It was still there, but now, happiness didn't seem so distant. After a month, she began to heal. Yet, despite the time spent together, Sasuke couldn't understand how Naruko seemed so unaffected. Not once did she show signs of sadness or distress in front of her. That belief, however, changed a couple of weeks ago when Sasuke unexpectedly woke in the middle of the night. Feeling thirsty, she had quietly made her way to the kitchen for a glass of water. Dressed in a loose blue t-shirt and black shorts, she felt a slight chill in the air and was eager to return to the warmth of her blankets. But as she walked back to her room, She heard faint noises coming from the dojo, located on the far side of the house. Curious, she approached the slightly ajar door and peered inside. What she saw left her speechless. Naruko was relentlessly striking a punching bag, her movements intense and unyielding. What caught Sasuke's attention even more, however, were the silent tears streaming down her face. The pain Naruko had been concealing was now evident, and it was far deeper than she had imagined. As Naruko's emotions intensified, so did the force of her punches. Eventually, she let out a muffled, restrained scream before driving her fist through the bag, burying it up to her wrist. Sasuke considered stepping in to console her but ultimately decided against it. It was clear that Naruko was trying to keep this hidden from her. When she's ready, she'll talk about it, Sasuke thought. For now, she would respect her friend's privacy. Kakashi visited frequently, assisting Naruko with training and having private discussions with her. Sasuke never attempted to eavesdrop, understanding that it was something personal between them. However, she did catch a single word once, Mangekyo. What does that mean? She wondered. Although she had yet to awaken her own Sharingan, she had been learning a great deal about its potential. Naruko helped her prepare by strengthening her body to keep up with the heightened perception and reflexes the Sharingan would grant her. That had been the main focus of her training over the past 2 months, and she was determined to master it. Neither of them had learned any new jutsu, instead dedicating their time to refining their existing skills and training each other in Kenjutsu and Shuriken Jutsu as promised. They were steadily becoming masters of both disciplines. Naruko had already mastered Kenjutsu and estimated that within another year, Sasuke would reach the same level. As for Shuriken Jutsu, Naruko believed she would master it within a month, given her relentless training day and night. That morning, Naruko woke up early and started preparing breakfast. She wore comfortable sweatpants and a sleeveless hoodie, her usual casual attire. Despite waking up before dawn, sleep had eluded her for some time now. Faint dark circles under her eyes hinted at her exhaustion, though they weren't too noticeable unless one paid close attention. She finished cooking eggs, bacon, and toast, then poured some orange juice before setting the table. Just as she was finishing up, Sasuke entered the kitchen. Naruko greeted her with a warm smile and a cheerful good morning before heading off to take a shower. Sasuke frowned slightly, puzzled. It had become a pattern. Naruko always made breakfast, but Sasuke had never actually seen her eat. There were no extra dishes in the sink, and she never joined Sasuke at the table. Instead, she went straight to training. This morning was no different. After her shower, Naruko changed into her usual attire, and the two left for the academy together. As they walked, Sasuke finally decided to ask what had been on her mind. "Hey, Naru?" Naruko glanced at her curiously. "Yes, Sasuke-chan? Why do you make breakfast if you never eat it yourself?" Naruko shrugged lightly. "Because it makes you happy. Besides, I'm just not that hungry." "You hardly eat, though." "Like I said, Sasuke-chan, I'm just not that hungry. Don't worry about me, today's the start of the academy, so let's focus on that." Sasuke hesitated, sensing that there was more to it. She suspected that Naruko's lack of appetite stemmed from something deeper, but she wasn't sure how to approach the subject. For now, she let it go. Eventually, she would find a way to get Naruko to open up. Soon, they arrived at the academy gates. The building was impressive, with the Grand Konoha Library standing just beside it. In front of the academy was a spacious training ground, featuring wooden targets for shuriken and kunai practice, as well as a circular sparring ring embedded in the ground. A large crowd of students had already gathered, chatting excitedly about their clans and who would be the strongest in their class. Naruko, uninterested in the boasting, chose to stand by a tree with a swing. As always, Sasuke followed her lead. "Sasuke-chan, you should try making some friends," Naruko suggested. "Why aren't you?" Sasuke countered. Naruko gave a small, knowing smile. "I'll tell you later, okay?" Sasuke didn't fully understand but trusted Naruko's words. She knew that Naruko never spoke lightly. If she said something, she meant it. So, she left her friend by the tree and approached the crowd, determined to meet some new people before class started. Naruko watched her go with a faint smile. She sincerely wanted Sasuke to build connections, even if she herself preferred to remain on the sidelines. As Sasuke moved through the crowd, she felt a bit nervous but refused to show it. Before she could decide whom to approach, two girls came up to her. One had blonde hair tied in a high ponytail, while the other had short, pink hair and seemed a bit shy. "Hey there. I'm Ino Yamanaka," the blonde introduced herself cheerfully. "And this is my friend, Sakura Haruno. She's a little shy, but she's really nice once you get to know her." "Hi," Sakura greeted softly. "Hello, I'm Sasuke," she replied. "The Uchiha?" Ino asked, her voice slightly louder than intended. Thankfully, no one else seemed to notice. "Yes," Sasuke answered, feeling a bit wary. Realizing it might not be the best topic, Ino quickly shifted the conversation, talking about how she and Sakura became friends and even mentioning her family's flower shop. Sasuke wasn't particularly interested in flowers, but she could tell Ino was trying to be friendly, so she listened politely. She was pulled from her thoughts when Ino suddenly asked, "Hey, who's that by the tree? She's been watching you." Sasuke glanced over and smiled slightly. "That's Naruko. For as long as I've known her, she's always looked out for me. She's just making sure I'm okay, nothing to worry about." "Is she your girlfriend?" Ino teased with a playful smirk. "What?" Sasuke nearly choked on her words. "Haha, I'm just kidding." Ino laughed. Then she tilted her head. "Her hair is really unique. Your jet black hair is pretty standard, but those red highlights in hers are interesting. Did she dye it?" "Nope," Sasuke replied with a small chuckle. "That's her natural hair. It's a bit odd since every Uchiha has pure black hair, so I'm not sure why hers is different." Interesting," Ino mused. "But why is she off on her own?" "I'm not sure," Sasuke admitted. "She said she'd tell me later, so I'm just waiting." They all continued chatting for a while, waiting for their instructor to arrive. Naruko remained slightly apart from the group but smiled, pleased that Sasuke had made a few friends. As she glanced around, her gaze landed on someone lying in the grass. So the Nara heir is in this class too. Yo, Naruko. Feeling antisocial today? Shikamaru called lazily from his spot in the grass. "You could say that. What about you?" she asked. "Just watching the clouds," he replied casually. Naruko chuckled softly and walked toward the entrance alongside Shikamaru, sensing that it was almost time for their instructor to arrive. To everyone's surprise, the Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, appeared with a few chunin. The students were delighted to see him. He delivered a speech, something about the will of fire, but Naruko and Shikamaru used the opportunity to take a quick nap. Miraculously, they woke up just as the speech concluded, their timing almost uncanny. Sasuke approached Naruko, curiosity in her eyes. "Didn't you think that was a great speech?" she asked. Yeah. Gigi has a way with words," Naruko replied, though Sasuke poked her lightly between the ribs, immediately catching on that she hadn't been paying attention. "Ah, come on, Sasuke-chan." Naruko whined playfully. "It's all right. You do need to rest, Naru. Just try to get enough sleep at home, all right?" "Sure," Naruko said, walking beside her. She was trying hard to stay composed, but having Sasuke at her side made it much easier. She didn't understand why, but with Sasuke nearby, everything felt quieter, more peaceful. Nothing else seemed to matter. One thing was certain, though, the academy was incredibly dull. Naruko found every moment excruciatingly boring. The entire first year consisted solely of lectures, and she hadn't learned anything new. Shisui had already taught her all the theory behind jutsu, chakra, and genjutsu. This year felt like a complete waste of time. I just want this to be over already. A sudden intrusive thought disrupted her mind. End it. Make them all disappear. Not again. Naruko accidentally muttered aloud. Unfortunately, the classroom had been completely silent as the students were focused on reading, and her words drew everyone's attention. The instructor, Iruka Umino, shot her a familiar disapproving glance. So he's just like the others. This year just got even longer. That conversation is more important than ever now. She must not be involved. A persistent, dark voice in her mind continued to whisper. You can stop the stares. The pain. Just do it. Naruko clenched her fists, trying to suppress the overwhelming thoughts. She gripped her pencil so tightly that it snapped in half. Naruko. Stay silent and focus on your work. Iruka ordered sternly, his expression filled with frustration. Great. This is worse than I thought. Should I aim to graduate early? But if I do, what happens then? You know you despise the way he looks at you. What will you do if he looks at her that way too? That thought struck a nerve. Naruko tensed, her eyes flashing a deep crimson for a brief moment. However, instead of the Sharingan, a distinct black slit appeared within them. Her whisker marks darkened, becoming more pronounced, but as quickly as the change came, it vanished. No one seemed to notice, except for one individual. Shikamaru Nara, from his seat, observed everything with sharp awareness. Troublesome. What are you hiding, Naruko? Whatever it is, I know this isn't the real you. When will you let someone in? We could help, you know. He glanced over at Sasuke and saw that she hadn't noticed the brief transformation. I wonder. Naruko slowly opened her now normal eyes and simply nodded toward Iruka, though her expression betrayed her emotions. That night, after a long day, Naruko and Sasuke returned home. Naruko prepared dinner, deciding they would eat together for a change. She knew Sasuke had questions, and she was expecting answers. So, do I need to ask, or will you just explain? Sasuke asked directly. Naruko sighed. Sasuke-chan, from now on, while we're at the academy or in public, it would be best if you didn't associate with me too much. What? Are you serious? Sasuke asked, her voice laced with disbelief. Are you ashamed of me or something? Naruko's expression softened. Of course not. You're very important to me, and that's exactly why I don't want you to get hurt because of me. Sasuke frowned. What do you mean, Naruko? Once more, she sighed. I don't quite understand why, but the villagers continue to cast me disdainful glances. Even our teacher treated me the same way today. However, I refuse to let their opinions, whatever the reason behind them, affect you. You still have the opportunity to make friends and enjoy your time. The other children keep their distance from me because their parents tell them to. If you stay too close, they may begin to avoid you as well. Naruko, I won't turn my back on you. You've always been there for me. And I always will be, even if it's from a distance, Naruko reassured gently. As long as you are happy, that's enough for me. When we return home, I'll be with you, so you'll never be alone. You'll have plenty of friends and people you can rely on. But who will be your friend? Who will you rely on? Sasuke's voice wavered with concern. Sasuke-chan. You are the only person I need, Naruko admitted with a quiet certainty. No one else matters, not Gigi, not Uncle Kakashi, no one. You are the calm that steadies my storm. So please, just be happy. For both of us. Sasuke was taken aback. Did she really mean more to Naruko than Lord Third and Kakashi? What did that imply? Why was she so certain she couldn't find anyone else? Could she truly be content as long as Sasuke was? Or was she simply trying to make Sasuke feel better about the reality that while she made friends, Naruko would remain alone? The future Naruko described sounded unbearably lonely, and Sasuke couldn't stand the thought of her feeling that way. She wasn't entirely sure what she felt toward Naruko, But she knew one thing, she didn't want her to suffer in silence. Why was it that every time something good happened for her, Naruko had to endure hardship without complaint, always putting on a brave face? That realization weighed heavily on her. Just how much pain did she hide behind her smile? If she truly valued Sasuke as much as she claimed, then surely, staying away from her outside of their home must hurt deeply. Naru. A tear slipped down Sasuke's cheek as she tightened her grip on Naruko's hand. What do you mean when you say you're a storm that I can calm? Naruko simply smiled, as if trying to ease her worries. Then, standing up, she said, I'm going to train for a bit. There's something I want to work on. Get some rest, okay? All right. Thank you. For everything? You never have to thank me, Sasuke-chan. You may not realize it, but you help me far more than I help you. With that, she vanished from sight, leaving Sasuke to process their conversation. She didn't know what to feel. Sad, because her friend always seemed to face adversity alone. Grateful, because despite it all, Naruko placed her happiness above everything else. It didn't make sense. Why? It would be a long time before either of them truly understood their emotions, but one thing was certain, they always had each other's backs. Hokage's office. Naruko-kun? What brings you here at this hour? I wanted to ask. Would there be any benefit to graduating early? She inquired thoughtfully. The coursework isn't particularly challenging, and my sensei doesn't seem to like me. I'm just trying to figure out what would be best. Well, since we are not in a time of war, early graduations are rarely permitted, the Hokage responded. But tell me, why do you really want to leave? Naruko hesitated before admitting, Gigi. I don't know how to put it into words, but I don't trust myself. The Hokage observed her carefully before offering a reassuring smile. Try to see it through. I'm sure Sasuke-san wouldn't want you to leave, and with time, I believe you'll find a place where you belong. I'll try, Naruko said softly. But... Well, you've befriended the Nara boy, haven't you? That's a start, Naruko-kun. I suppose you're right, she replied, offering a small but sincere smile. When will Uncle Kakashi be back? Tomorrow night. I'll let him know you were asking for him. Naruko nodded and disappeared as if she had never been there. One question always lingered in her mind, though she never voiced it, why did they see her the way they did? She hadn't done anything wrong, at least, not that she was aware of. Hiruzen felt a deep sense of disappointment in Iruka. The Chunin had once expressed his strong desire to become an academy instructor so he could help shape the future generation. Where had that passion gone? Hiruzen understood that Iruka had suffered a great loss when he lost his parents during the Kyuubi attack, but placing blame on a child was disheartening. How can I make things better? At this rate, Naruko-kun may never find value in her own life. She has nothing to hold on to, nothing to inspire her forward, Hiruzen murmured to himself. With time, he hoped that Naruko's life would change for the better, allowing her to rediscover joy and purpose. Shikamaru's house. Father, I have a question, but I feel it's quite troublesome. What is it? Shikaku asked, intrigued. Shikamaru rarely showed interest in anything. It's about Naruko. Shikaku glanced at his son, already piecing together where this was going. He knew Shikamaru had a keen eye and noticed things that others overlooked. When I'm around her, she's always kind and even funny, a bit of a handful, honestly. But today, I saw something different in her expression. It was like pure frustration, something I've never seen before. The way people treat her, the way they look at her. It's as if she's some kind of outcast. What's going on? Well, what do you think of her? I think she's my friend. Then follow your own judgment, Shikamaru. People's opinions are often misguided. In time, perspectives may change. Just do what you believe is right. Shikaku was among the few who knew the full truth about Naruko. As one of Minato's most trusted advisors and a brilliant strategist, he never viewed Naruko the way many others did. But he also knew that pity wouldn't help her. No one likes to be pitied. Alright. Then I'll just be her friend. But she keeps distancing herself more and more. So, she's struggling with the QB. Shikaku mused. That look you saw, along with her isolation. She's probably trying to protect others, making sure no one gets caught up in something she can't control. If she wants to be alone, should I respect that? Do what you believe is best. If she truly wants space, then give it to her. But if you ask, she may explain things in her own time. Shikamaru nodded and left, deep in thought. One thing was certain, Naruko had many secrets. Some of them, he might never fully understand. But how much would knowing them change everything? Naruko was a mystery. Time passes. Weeks went by, and every day, more and more people gravitated toward Sasuke. She was admired by nearly everyone. On the other hand, Naruko remained on her own. She had told Shikamaru the same thing she had told Sasuke, and he understood why. He reassured Naruko that he saw her as a friend, no matter what. If she ever needed help, he would be there, even if it was troublesome. That had made Naruko laugh a little. They shook hands, sealing their understanding. Naruko had only one request, to look after Sasuke. With training to focus on and Sasuke gaining more friends, Naruko wouldn't always be able to keep an eye on her. Then, she did something that puzzled Shikamaru. She raised her hand, waiting patiently. Suddenly, a crow swooped down, landing gently on her outstretched fingers. If anything happens or if you need me, leave a message with the crow. It will find me, and I'll come to help. You can control crows? More like cooperate with them. But in a way, I guess you could say that. How troublesome. Alright, Naruko. I'll help you with this. Thank you. Then, before Shikamaru could say another word, Naruko vanished in a blur. The sheer speed startled him. Just how much are you hiding, Naruko? If only he knew the full extent of her abilities. Naruko's birthday. A couple of months passed, and soon, it was Naruko's birthday. She had an odd feeling about the day but decided to go about it as normally as possible. The moment she stepped out of her room, she was immediately tackled. Happy birthday, Naru. Sasuke cheered, wrapping her arms around Naruko. Haha, thank you, Sasuke-chan. I'm surprised you woke up before me, it's really early, you know. Yeah, Sasuke pouted playfully. You owe me for this. But isn't it my birthday? Naruko asked, clearly amused. Yes, but that doesn't excuse the fact that I had to wake up so early. Naruko smirked. Alright, what do you want? She knew she wouldn't win this argument and decided to just go along with it. Sasuke giggled, hugging Naruko from behind and resting her head on her shoulder. You'll let me help you celebrate today? Oh? That's all? You're being surprisingly easy on me. Don't push your luck, Naru. Alright. What would you like to do? Naruko asked with a light-hearted laugh. She had carried Sasuke over to the couch before settling down beside her. After a moment, she stood up and made her way to the kitchen, returning with a glass of juice for her friend. Well, maybe we could go out to eat somewhere, your choice. I know you're friends with Shikamaru, so I'm sure he'd be up for it. Is there anyone else you'd like to invite? I don't really mind. You can bring some of your friends if you want. It's your birthday, not mine. It wouldn't feel right for me to decide who comes, Naruko said with a smile. Alright. I'll send a message to Gigi, he'll take care of everything. So you're just going to pass the responsibility on to the poor old Hokage, huh? Sasuke chuckled. Exactly, Naruko replied, grinning. Sasuke shook her head and laughed, unable to hold back her amusement. Only Naruko could casually add to the Hokage's workload without a second thought. As the morning continued, Naruko began preparing breakfast, taking the opportunity to teach Sasuke a few cooking techniques. Sasuke had never really learned to cook, so she figured she might as well pick up something new while she was awake. The simple act of learning from Naruko brought a smile to her face. Naruko seemed happier than she had in a long time. Sasuke had missed this side of her. Seeing Naruko so lively again made her eyes well up with emotion. The last time Naruko had been this cheerful was before everything changed, before the tragedy that had taken so much away from them. Sasuke still carried the pain of those events, but having her friends and Naruko by her side made it more bearable. However, that was also what worried her about Naruko. She had a habit of suppressing her emotions, burying them deep rather than confronting them. Sasuke often wondered just how much Naruko could endure before she reached her breaking point. The thought unsettled her. She knew the extent of Naruko's abilities, at least, as much as she had witnessed. But even she wasn't sure of the full scope of Naruko's power, as Naruko had always trained harder and often did so in solitude. Though Sasuke continued honing her own skills, her training had become less frequent due to her time at the academy and with friends. She practiced only a few days a week for a few hours at a time. Meanwhile, Naruko maintained a rigorous training schedule, rarely sleeping and constantly improving. Despite this, she never hesitated to help Sasuke whenever she needed guidance. Sasuke couldn't help but wonder when she would finally awaken her Sharingan. Among the Uchiha, this was a defining milestone, the moment when one was truly recognized as part of the clan. Learning the fireball jutsu was only the first step. The real test was awakening their inherited Kekkei Genkai. She couldn't hide her disappointment that it hadn't happened yet. "Don't stress about it, Sasuke-chan. It'll happen soon. Just be patient," Naruko reassured her. "How did you? We've known each other for a long time." "I can tell it's bothering you," Naruko said, offering a knowing smile. "But remember, I'm a rare case when it comes to the Sharingan. Most people don't awaken it as early as I did. Usually, it happens when they become Genin and have built up enough chakra reserves. Just give it time, I know you'll awaken yours soon." Sasuke felt a sense of relief hearing Naruko's words. Rather than looking down on her for not having awakened the Sharingan yet, Naruko believed in her. That meant more than she could put into words. The truth was, most Uchiha would have been disappointed in her, but Naruko was right, awakening the Sharingan typically required time, experience, and emotional growth. As they made their way to the academy, Naruko noticed the increasingly intense stares directed at her. The glares were sharper than usual, filled with hostility. What was their problem today? "Stay away from Sasuke, you troublemaker!" someone suddenly shouted. Naruko blinked in confusion. "Troublemaker? I'm nothing of the sort. Uchiha, leave before she causes you any harm," another voice added. Sasuke frowned. "What are you talking about? Naruko isn't going to hurt anyone." Naruko let out a sigh. She had grown used to the way some people treated her, but she couldn't understand why they were always so quick to judge. No matter what she did, there were always those who refused to see her for who she really was. Still, she wasn't about to let it ruin her day, especially not when she had a friend like Sasuke by her side. This man was truly perplexing her. Why did he refer to Naruko as a demon? Why would he believe she would bring harm to others, let alone cause destruction? A woman pulled her out of her thoughts, grasping her wrist and leading her away. As she was being dragged, she noticed that more people had gathered in the street, forming a barrier in the direction Naruko was headed. They stood in a semicircle, their expressions wary, as though preparing to confront a formidable force. Naruko's eyes widened in alarm as she saw her friend being taken. "Sasuke!" She called out, reaching for her, but her fingers barely grazed the air before the distance grew. Fear gripped Naruko, she couldn't bear the thought of Sasuke being harmed. A powerful surge of emotion coursed through her, overwhelming every other thought. Her normally bright blue eyes shifted to a deep crimson with black slits, her whisker-like markings darkened and became more defined, and her golden hair grew wilder, giving her an untamed appearance. "You will release her? Now?" Her voice carried an unnatural weight, laced with an eerie, commanding presence. The sheer intensity of her aura sent shivers down the spines of those nearby. Sasuke froze. She had never seen Naruko like this, never heard her voice take on such an unsettling tone. She wasn't afraid for herself, she knew Naruko would never hurt her. But she feared for those around them. She didn't know what to do. The woman holding Sasuke hesitated, attempting to retreat, but the men who had gathered to confront Naruko suddenly lunged at her. In the blink of an eye, they collapsed, unconscious. Naruko had vanished from sight. Sasuke turned sharply at the sound of movement behind her. The woman who had been restraining her now knelt on the ground, gasping for air, her grip loosening. Naruko stood nearby, her breathing heavy, her hands trembling. In an instant, masked figures appeared, Anbu operatives, the village's elite forces. They surrounded Naruko, their posture tense. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on everyone present. They feared what this transformation could mean. Had the immense power within her taken control? Was she still herself? Sandaime-sama. The Anbu murmured in unison as the third Hokage stepped forward. His expression was grave yet calm. Naruko's red eyes darted around, scanning her surroundings. She no longer sensed hostility. Slowly, her features returned to normal, and as the reality of the situation sank in, her legs gave way beneath her. She dropped to her knees, staring at her shaking hands. A wave of emotion overtook her, and silent tears streamed down her face. Sasuke took a step forward, wanting to comfort her, but a gentle hand on her shoulder stopped her. She looked up to see the Hokage's reassuring gaze. Go to the academy and carry on as if nothing happened. Do not speak of this to anyone, he instructed in a measured tone. You may visit my office after your classes are done. She hesitated before nodding, knowing he was trying to protect both her and Naruko. As she turned to leave, she glanced back one last time. Why did happiness always seem just out of reach for Naruko? Every time things seemed to be looking up for her, something would come and take it away. A single tear slipped down Sasuke's cheek as she lowered her gaze. She hated the thought that Naruko might never truly find peace. She didn't deserve this endless struggle. Hokage's office. How is she? Kakashi arrived swiftly. The only time he was never late was when it concerned Naruko. She's resting now, but the first real battle is always the most challenging. Given the circumstances that led to it, she's bound to be shaken. Especially when she reflects on the fact that they weren't trained shinobi. What should we do, Sandaime-sama? At every turn, she faces more and more hardship. All we can do is hope she remains strong. I believe that as long as Sasuke is safe, she will be. My only concern is what might happen if Sasuke isn't. Kakashi nodded. He knew how deeply Naruko cared for Sasuke, perhaps even more than she fully realized. If it came down to it, Naruko would rather endure any hardship herself than see Sasuke harmed. She might not fully understand her emotions, but Kakashi recognized them for what they were, genuine care, an unspoken bond. A connection strengthened by their experiences, amplified by the Sharingan, deepened by the Mangekyo. Sasuke was her guiding light through the shadows of her past. They've already been through so much. They're fortunate to have each other, Kakashi observed as he gazed at the sleeping Naruko. That they are, Hiruzen agreed. Perhaps that was the one certainty Naruko had, she would always have Kakashi, Hiruzen, and Yugao. But even their support couldn't compare to what Sasuke meant to her. The academy. Iruka was taking attendance, and so far, everyone had been present as usual. At the very bottom of the list was Naruko. He called out her name, no response. A second time, then a third, still nothing. Looking up, he noticed her absence. Where's Naruko? Does anyone know? Sasuke's expression briefly faltered, but she quickly masked it. Hokage-sama is with her, sensei. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow, immediately sensing there was more to the story. Sasuke was holding something back? The other students, however, remained skeptical. Most of them viewed Naruko as incompetent, assuming her lack of attention in class was due to an inability to understand the material. Their opinions were largely shaped by their parents, who had warned them to avoid her, except for a select few, including Shikamaru, Ino, and a handful of others. TCH, I bet that troublemaker is just skipping class. No way Hokage-sama would waste his time on her. Kiba declared smugly. He didn't necessarily dislike Naruko, but he always wanted to assert himself as the strongest. As Sasuke's friend, he often spoke without thinking, simply for the sake of saying something. Exactly. A failure like that could never have the Hokage's attention, another student scoffed. You guys are clueless, Shikamaru muttered under his breath. What was that, lazybones? Kiba challenged. Troublesome, Shikamaru sighed. Enough. Iruka interrupted, his tone sharp. It doesn't matter why she's not here. We'll continue with the lesson, with or without her. His last words carried an edge of disdain, something Sasuke noticed immediately. A few students smirked at their teacher's tone, finding amusement in it. To Sasuke, it stung. Shikamaru, though outwardly composed, felt irritation at the blatant treatment of his friend. Meanwhile, Ino, who had never formed a strong opinion of Naruko, simply observed. She only knew that Naruko looked after Sasuke, which she secretly found sweet. Seeing the class and even their instructor openly display such disregard for her must have been painful. The day dragged on, uneventful and dull. When it finally ended, Ino approached Shikamaru. Hey, she said, I know you're probably Naruko's only real friend. She really values you. Shikamaru exhaled through his nose. Yeah, she's a good friend. I appreciate that she thinks so highly of me. I just wish she'd open up more. But I have a feeling the reasons behind that are troublesome. Ino crossed her arms. Well, I'm heading to the Hokage's office. Since Naruko has been there all day, I figured I'd stop by. It is her birthday, after all. This morning, she said she'd like you to come. Shikamaru nodded. Sure. It'll give me an excuse to get away from my mom for a while. Hokage's office. Naruko stirred awake, her mind groggy. As her vision cleared, she recognized the familiar faces in the room, Hiruzen, Kakashi, and Yugao. For a moment, a small smile tugged at her lips, but then the weight of reality came crashing back. Her expression darkened, and tears welled up in her eyes. I'm a monster. I'm the demon they say I am. Hiruzen's gaze softened. No, Naruko. You protected Sasuke, you defended yourself. There's nothing monstrous about that. You'll always be Naruko Uchiha. Nothing else, Kakashi reassured her, placing a firm yet gentle hand on her shoulder. You are family, and that will never change. And you'll always be that little troublemaker I had to keep an eye on, Yugao added with a small smile. I know I haven't been around as much. I'm sorry for that. I've been grieving. Naruko didn't respond with words. Instead, she stepped forward and embraced them all, letting the tears fall freely. It's your birthday. How about we go get something to eat? Sasuke and Shikamaru should be here soon, Hiruzen said with a warm smile. Naruko's face lit up at the mention of that name, especially Sasuke's. Today marked her 7th birthday, yet it was another year overshadowed by troubling events. When she turned 4, she experienced an incident that awakened her Sharingan. At 6, she learned about the loss of her only family. And now, at 7, she had faced a moment that would change her forever. There was something she hadn't told anyone, a part of her felt relieved about what had happened. That small voice in the back of her mind whispered that things were finally over. Those who had caused her pain would never look at her that way again. They would never try to harm her. Most importantly, they would never try to take Sasuke away from her. The problem was gone. Yet, conflicting emotions stirred within her. On one hand, she felt a sense of closure. On the other, she couldn't ignore the weight of what had transpired. The people involved had their own lives, their own families and friends, and now that had all changed because of her actions. Was it wrong to feel relief? She wasn't sure. All she knew was that Sasuke was safe, and that was what mattered most. The sad truth was that the woman involved had not intended to cause harm. In reality, she had seen the chaos unfolding and had only wanted to get Sasuke to safety. But Naruko hadn't realized that at the time, and neither had Sasuke. Fear had clouded her judgment, and in the heat of the moment, her emotions had taken over. They all gathered and caught up, eager to see how much Naruko had progressed since their last meeting. While they were curious, she chose to keep some aspects of her growth a secret. For instance, she had now mastered the final genjutsu passed down by Shisui, the bringer of darkness, and was close to perfecting the 3 fire-style techniques given to her by Kakashi: Dragon Flame Bomb, Great Dragon Flame, and Fire Breathe. Additionally, her ability to create after-image clones remained undisclosed, though they did notice she could now incorporate them into battle much like Shisui. They were astonished when she demonstrated her ability to perform the Great Fireball and Phoenix Flower techniques without hand seals. Naruko didn't reveal it, but Kakashi was aware that she had also mastered the demonic illusion, hell viewing technique without needing physical contact, a rare and impressive feat. At just 7 years old, Naruko displayed incredible potential. Skill-wise, she was easily at the level of a Chunin, though she lacked experience. While she had yet to demonstrate strong leadership qualities, her efforts in training Sasuke in Kenjutsu had been remarkable. Naruko was becoming a formidable shinobi, and if she could learn to manage her emotions, she would be truly unstoppable. Suddenly, the door swung open, and before anyone could react, Naruko was enveloped in a tight embrace from Sasuke. The 3 onlookers simply smiled, knowing that as long as Sasuke was by her side, things would be all right. They were even more surprised when Shikamaru lazily strolled in after her. "Are you okay?" Sasuke whispered. Naruko held onto her and nodded, though Sasuke could sense otherwise. She decided to talk to her later in private. For now, they were all focused on enjoying the moment. "So, what kept you busy today, Naruko?" Shikamaru asked, pulling them out of their embrace. "We were discussing some leaking pipes at her house," Hiruzen quickly interjected. Shikamaru chuckled at the excuse. It sounded ridiculous, but he found it too troublesome to question further. The rest of the evening went smoothly. They enjoyed a hearty meal at Ichiraku's, chatting as if everything were perfectly normal. Meanwhile, Kakashi subtly observed Naruko, trying to gauge her emotions. A part of him was concerned, sensing that a portion of her might have found satisfaction in what had happened earlier. However, he dismissed the thought and let it go. On their way home, Naruko and Sasuke stopped for some dango as a small treat. Naruko couldn't help but chuckle when she noticed Sasuke eyeing the sweets with longing. "You do realize you can actually eat them, right? Not just stare at them?" Naruko teased, laughing at her friend's hesitation. "Oh, hush," Sasuke huffed, lightly pouting. When they finally arrived home and the door shut behind them, the mood shifted. Naruko didn't turn around. Instead, she simply stared at the door, already knowing why. She sighed before speaking first. "You're afraid of me, aren't you?" Naruko's voice was unsteady. Sasuke had always been her light, but today, Naruko had revealed a side of herself she hadn't even known existed. She had thought about it before, but to actually act on those thoughts was something she hadn't expected. "I understand if you don't want to stay. Naru, you're such a lovable goof, you know that?" Sasuke said, hugging her from behind. Naruko felt her eyes sting. "No. I promised myself I wouldn't cry in front of you again. That I wouldn't show weakness. Naruko, I know you train all night. I know you still cry," Sasuke said softly. "I saw you 2 weeks before we started at the academy. I didn't say anything because I hoped you would talk to me when you were ready." She rested her cheek against Naruko's back, and Naruko instinctively reached down to hold Sasuke's hands, which were wrapped around her waist. "I just wanted to be strong for you," Naruko admitted, her voice breaking as she struggled to contain her emotions. "It's not weakness to express your feelings, silly. In fact, it takes real strength to be vulnerable with someone else." Slowly, Naruko turned around and embraced Sasuke. I don't know how to say everything I feel, but I do know that I care about you more than anything. If you want me to talk about what's been bothering me, I will. I just need time. I'm not ready yet. Sasuke smiled against her chest, sensing the warmth returning to Naruko. The heaviness that had surrounded her earlier that day had lifted, replaced by a sense of comfort and safety. I care about you too, Naru. Just remember, I'm always here for you, always by your side, just like you are for me. When you're ready, you can tell me anything. 4 years later. This was the year leading up to the final year at the academy. Most of the class was 11, while Naruko was 10 since her birthday fell later in the year. This year, their training intensified, focusing heavily on shuriken jutsu. No longer were their days solely dedicated to reading and learning history, now, they were immersed in practical training, refining their shinobi skills. Naruko and Sasuke stood at the top of the class, excelling in nearly every aspect of their training. However, there was one peculiar exception: Naruko struggled with the most basic clone jutsu. Sasuke often teased her about it, though she quickly regretted it whenever they sparred. The rest of the class found humor in Naruko's difficulty, clinging to it as the one flaw they could use against her. It was ironic, she could outperform them in every other field, yet this single issue made them perceive her as weak. Despite this, Naruko remained as reserved as ever. However, she grew closer to Shikamaru, and together they befriended another quiet classmate, Shino Aburame. Interestingly, Shino's insects reacted strangely to Naruko, as if sensing something unusual about her, though he never questioned it. Kuji, having been Shikamaru's friend for years, was eventually introduced to Naruko as well. While they maintained a strong bond in private, they rarely interacted publicly, as many still viewed Naruko differently. Sasuke and Naruko's friendship deepened, with Sasuke slowly becoming aware of the burdens Naruko carried. Yet, she was never deterred. Naruko found solace in confiding in her, though it wasn't easy. Opening up remained a challenge, even with Sasuke's unwavering support. Naruko had mastered all her jutsu and could perform them effortlessly. She constantly worked on improving her teleportation jutsu, hoping to incorporate more clones into it. It was quickly becoming her favorite technique, efficient and far less draining on her chakra compared to others. However, she only revealed the full extent of her abilities to Sasuke. While the Hokage, Kakashi, and Yugao recognized her talent, they had no idea just how advanced she had become. Iruka's attitude toward Naruko had softened considerably over the years, much to everyone's surprise. No longer did he openly express resentment toward her. Flashback. Iruka, said Hiruzen, his voice calm yet firm. Yes, Lord Third? Why do you hold such hostility toward Naruko? Iruka hesitated. Lord Third. She is the Nine Tails? Hiruzen interrupted. No. She is not. The Nine Tails and Naruko are not the same. They are two separate beings. One is a human child, the other a tailed beast. They are bound together by a seal, but that is all. Have you ever considered that she, too, suffered a great loss that night? Iruka's eyes widened. What do you mean? She once had a family, Hiruzen explained. But they perished the same night your parents did, because of the Nine Tails. In many ways, she is just like you. The only difference is that she has never known the love of a mother or father. You see her as a burden, but have you ever stopped to think about how she feels? She puts on a strong front, but do you truly believe she is unaffected by the way you and so many others treat her? Iruka looked down, guilt settling in. No, she wouldn't be. The loneliness she carries. You cannot begin to imagine the weight of it. She has sacrificed the chance to form friendships, to experience even a semblance of a normal childhood, all to protect those around her. She isolates herself not because she wants to, but because she fears that anyone who gets too close will suffer as she has. A child her age should be laughing, playing, and making memories. Instead, she endures rejection, isolation, and hostility. Iruka clenched his fists, ashamed of his actions. Where had he gone wrong? He had always aspired to be a teacher who shaped the future of Konoha, yet here he was, crushing the spirit of a child who could one day protect the very village he cherished. I can't believe what I've done," he whispered. "Lord Third, I'm so sorry. I lost sight of what truly mattered. I wanted to guide the next generation, but instead, I turned my back on one of them." "It's not too late," Hiruzen reassured him. "You still have the opportunity to be the teacher you set out to be. All it takes is an open mind." Iruka took a deep breath and nodded. "You said there's only one person she truly cares for?" "Yes," Hiruzen confirmed. "Sasuke Uchiha. They don't even talk to each other." "What do? Oh, right. I almost forgot what you said. I promise, from now on, I will do better and guide these children to become outstanding shinobi for the village." Hiruzen smiled, pleased that his words had resonated with Iruka. He could see that Iruka had rekindled his belief in the values he once held dear and would no longer harbor resentment toward Naruko. Flashback ends. Sasuke was incredibly popular, and many of the boys attempted to ask her out, though all were politely turned down. Shikamaru found it amusing. He already knew who would win her heart, even if the two of them were still oblivious to their own feelings. He wondered how long it would take for them to realize it themselves. Sakura had grown more confident, no longer the shy girl who once relied heavily on Ino. Though they remained best friends and were among the top students, only Sasuke surpassed them academically among the girls. Among the boys, Shikamaru was the most intelligent, with Naruko following closely behind. In terms of overall ranking, it was Shikamaru first, then Naruko, then Sasuke based on their test scores. Since their physical training had only recently begun, they had yet to spar against each other and were still focusing on mastering their taijutsu forms. Sparring would begin the following year, scheduled 3 times a week. Kiba frequently boasted about both his combat skills and his chances of winning over Sasuke. Sakura felt nervous about the upcoming sparring matches. Ino was somewhat confident. Shikamaru found it bothersome. Shino remained indifferent. Huji was more concerned about whether he would need to increase his snack intake due to the extra energy he'd be using. Hinata was also a bit anxious. Sasuke, on the other hand, was excited to start sparring. However, she found Kiba's boasting rather irritating and wished he would stop. She wanted to prove that Naruko's faith in her was justified. She didn't want to let her down. Lately, she had been feeling something unfamiliar whenever she thought about Naruko, but she couldn't quite place what it was. Naruko, on her part, was slightly concerned about controlling her strength if provoked. Still, she knew that none of her classmates could defeat her in a straight taijutsu match. Perhaps if Hinata were more assertive and embodied the traditional strength of the Hyuga clan, she would be a greater challenge. As it stood, her only true rival in taijutsu was Sasuke. Interestingly, Naruko had begun to experience a strange feeling whenever she was around Sasuke, one she couldn't quite understand but was certain existed. Unbeknownst to her, Sasuke felt the same way. One thing was clear, Naruko and Shikamaru both had a good idea of how the rankings would unfold. Naruko would take the top spot, with Sasuke following closely behind. Shikamaru would land in third, not because of a lack of skill, but because he simply wouldn't put in the effort unless necessary. He was intelligent enough to devise a strategy against almost anyone, except Naruko, who was nearly impossible to defeat in a direct taijutsu match. While he could challenge Sasuke with careful planning, victory was never guaranteed. The rest of the rankings weren't of much concern. Sakura would likely place lower, with Ino slightly above her and Hinata ranking just above both. However, there was always the possibility of surprises. If Hinata overcame her timidity, the entire dynamic could shift, but that was a long shot, in Shikamaru's opinion. Later that night, Naruko awoke to the sound of movement in the kitchen. Instinctively, she reached for her tanto and moved silently through the halls, scanning for any signs of an intruder. The kitchen and living room lights were on, but nothing seemed out of place. What kind of burglar would leave everything untouched? Huh? Sasuke-chan? Naruko asked as she spotted the unexpected visitor. Oops, Did you hear me drop the pan? Sasuke turned toward her, and for the first time, she took in Naruko's appearance. Naruko was dressed casually in sweatpants, without a shirt, revealing her toned physique. Though she wasn't fully developed yet, it was clear that as she grew older, her strength and form would only become more defined. Then, Sasuke noticed the tanto in Naruko's hand. Oh. You thought I was, haha. Well, You. Sasuke stumbled over her words, flustered. What is it? Naruko tilted her head, confused by Sasuke's reaction. Then, she realized, she wasn't wearing a shirt. Oh. Without another word, she used the body flicker technique to vanish into her room, returning moments later wearing a sleeveless black sweater. Sasuke giggled, her cheeks flushed. It was amusing to see Naruko flustered, and for some reason, seeing her like that had made Sasuke feel different. She wasn't quite sure why, but the sight of Naruko shirtless had caused her heart to race. Naruko returned, slightly embarrassed, and decided to change the subject. So, what exactly are you doing? She asked. Well, I had a plan, but it kind of fell apart since I'm not as skilled in the kitchen as you are, Sasuke admitted with a playful pout. Oh? My Sasuke-chan, trying her hand at cooking? Naruko teased, wrapping her arms around Sasuke from behind in a light-hearted embrace. She knew he was teasing her since she had initiated the playful exchange first, but something about being called his and seeing him without a shirt, combined with the warmth of this embrace, had her blushing brighter than a ripe tomato. He had never held her like this before, and to her surprise, she found that she truly enjoyed it. Today was shaping up to be a day of firsts. So, what was this grand plan of yours, Naruko rested his chin on her shoulder, prompting her to lean her head against his, allowing their cheeks to touch. She raised her right hand, gently running her fingers through his hair, while her left hand rested on his arms, which were wrapped securely around her waist. She let out a soft sigh of contentment, relishing the warmth he radiated and the feeling of being held. I wanted to make you breakfast for the first time, especially since it's your birthday, Naru. Though he didn't voice it, he deeply appreciated the way her fingers played with his hair. There was something undeniably comforting about holding her close. For both of them, this moment felt right, though neither could quite put into words why. Oh, I see. I really appreciate it, Sasuke-chan. He tightened his embrace slightly and began to sway them gently from side to side. Minutes passed unnoticed as they stood together, lost in each other's presence. Eventually, he loosened his hold, and they both instinctively sighed in disappointment. Their eyes met, and the realization struck them at the same time: the other had felt that same reluctance to let go. Their shared understanding only deepened the warmth in their cheeks. Naru? Uh-huh. I'm not sure. I'm not either. A brief silence settled between them as they both tried to process what had just happened and what it might mean. Yet, no clear answers surfaced. You know? Never mind. No, wait, what is it? Sasuke asked, a hint of urgency in her voice. She didn't know what she was hoping for, only that she didn't want him to hold back. Well? It's just that. How do I say this? You're my best friend, Sasuke-chan. And you're mine too. Yeah, and... Well? What if? What if what? Sasuke and Naruko unconsciously stepped closer, gazing into each other's eyes. What if we were? More? Yes. Absolutely yes. 1,000 times yes. Without hesitation, she leapt into his arms, and they embraced once more. Their smiles stretched wide, their happiness unmistakable. At this moment, nothing else in the world mattered. Today truly marked the beginning of something new, their first breakfast as a couple, his first birthday spent as a couple, and countless more firsts to come. So, where did you get the idea to cook for me? Naruko chuckled as they remained wrapped in each other's arms. Because you always make eggs and bacon for breakfast, and on my birthday, you made me pancakes with a side of dango. Naruko laughed, but before he could respond, she playfully punched him in the chest, only to immediately return to hugging him. Slightly confused by the sudden shift, he decided not to question it, he was simply too happy in the moment. "Don't make fun of me," she pouted after lightly hitting him. "Hey, I thought it was adorable, okay? But as much as I'm enjoying this, if we stay here any longer, we're going to be late. At the academy." "Alright, class. You've all had plenty of time to practice your forms, so today, we'll be starting sparring matches," the instructor announced. Excitement buzzed through the students as they prepared for their matchups. Every time Naruko and Sasuke's eyes met, they both blushed slightly. Shikamaru, observing from the sidelines, raised an eyebrow. "So? Something's changed between them. Did they finally admit it? Took them long enough. Troublesome," he muttered to himself. "The first matchup will be Shikamaru vs. Kuji." "Troublesome," Shikamaru sighed before stepping into the ring. Shikamaru vs. Kuji. The two stood opposite each other, adopting their respective fighting stances. Kuji, with his larger build and impressive strength, faced off against Shikamaru, who was leaner and more agile. It had the potential to be an interesting match, if not for Shikamaru's infamous laziness. As soon as the instructor signaled the start of the fight, Shikamaru simply sighed, turned around, and walked out of the ring, automatically forfeiting. Since the goal was either to knock out the opponent or force them out of the ring, his voluntary exit resulted in an immediate loss. Naruko chuckled internally, shooting Shikamaru a look that conveyed exactly what he thought. In response, Shikamaru returned a knowing glance that said, "Too much effort." Ino vs. Sakura. Ino and Sakura stood across from each other, ready for their match to begin. Neither was known for exceptional combat skills, but both were determined to give their best effort. As soon as the signal was given, they charged toward each other. "They're really slow," Naruko thought as she observed the fight. Sakura wound up for a wide, easily telegraphed punch, one that could be dodged or countered effortlessly. However, Ino wasn't quick enough to react and took the hit directly. In response, Ino mirrored Sakura's attack, landing a punch in the same manner. The two jumped back, measuring each other's determination. "You're fast," Sakura admitted. Crowd reaction. "Huh?" Naruko blurted out, surprised. Laughter erupted from the audience. While the match wasn't at a high level, everyone knew that Ino and Sakura weren't the strongest in hand-to-hand combat. Sasuke giggled the most, pleased to see Naruko enjoying herself. Even if it was unintentional, the light-hearted moment seemed to lift her spirits. "Yeah, you're strong," Ino replied, smiling. Naruko shook her head in amusement and started pacing, mumbling to herself. The class laughed again at her reaction. The two competitors rushed at each other once more, both preparing to strike at the same time. Their fists connected simultaneously, neither dodging nor blocking. It turned into a back-and-forth exchange, resembling a simple game rather than a strategic battle. Panting, they stepped back, locking eyes. They saw each other as true rivals and strategized their next move. After a brief moment, they both dashed forward, aiming to tackle each other from the right side. However, since both had the same plan, they missed entirely and tumbled out of the ring. "The match ends in a draw," Iruka announced. Naruko vs. Kiba. "Alright, next up, Kiba vs. Naruko. Please enter the ring," Iruka called out. Kiba smirked confidently. "Once I win, two things will happen. 1. Everyone will know I'm the best. 2. Sasuke will agree to go on a date with me," he declared loudly. "Just give it a rest already," Naruko sighed. "What's wrong? You actually think you stand a chance against me?" Kiba taunted. If only he knew the truth about my strength. Naruko thought to herself. You really think she'll ever notice you? I'm the strongest here. I'm the one she'll choose, and you'll never defeat me. Naruko remained calm on the surface, but Kiba's arrogance was beginning to irritate her. He kept boasting about his strength and how he would win over Sasuke. The more he talked, the more it got under her skin. Crowd discussion. Kiba might want to watch his words. Shikamaru muttered. What do you mean? Naru-chan looks calm, Sasuke said, standing beside him. Naru-chan, huh? Shikamaru smirked. I mean Naruko. She corrected quickly. It's all right. I was wondering how long it would take for you two to realize, he teased before turning serious. But really, Kiba should be careful. Naruko doesn't usually mind when people talk about her, but she's always been protective of you. If he keeps running his mouth, he might push her too far. Sasuke's expression shifted. Oh. This might not end well for Kiba. Nope. Troublesome, Shikamaru muttered. The fight begins. So, the sooner you lose, the sooner I can take Sasuke on a date. Kiba shouted as he charged forward. He swung at Naruko, assuming she was distracted. However, she effortlessly dodged his attack. As he passed her, he felt an eerie chill in the air, something dark and unsettling. Slowly, Naruko lifted her gaze, her usually bright blue eyes now sharp and intense, with her whisker marks appearing more pronounced. You look surprised, Naruko said in a calm yet unsettling tone. Weren't you going to prove you were the strongest? Kiba attacked again, attempting a spinning kick, but missed completely. What's wrong? Naruko taunted. I thought you were going to show me your strength. Kiba tried again and again, but no matter what he did, he couldn't land a single hit. Crowd's concern. Naru. No, Sasuke whispered, her expression filled with concern. What's happening to her? Shikamaru asked. I don't fully understand it, but Naruko once told me that there's something inside her that reacts to negative emotions, like anger or sadness, and tries to influence her. This is what happens when she loses control. Her demeanor shifts, and she becomes more intense and relentless, Sasuke explained. You've seen it before? Once. And it was terrifying, Sasuke admitted. She was attacked, and when one of them tried to grab me, she completely lost herself. She fought back fiercely to protect me. I don't want anyone to misunderstand her, she's not dangerous. She struggles with this every day and deserves happiness, but something always seems to stand in her way. Tears welled up in her eyes. Shikamaru gave her a reassuring nod. I won't judge her for it. Naruko's my friend, and she's always been there for me. No matter how troublesome she is, I'll support her. Sasuke chuckled softly. Yeah, she is pretty troublesome, isn't she? Shikamaru then realized something. Wait. Kiba's in trouble, isn't he? I trust Naru-chan, Sasuke said with a small smile. Naruko versus Kiba. Naruko observed Kiba, who had fallen to the ground, with a mixture of disappointment and disapproval. Was this really the extent of his strength after all the confidence he had displayed? You talk a big game, Kiba, but in reality, you're not as strong as you claim to be, she remarked. Be quiet. Kiba growled. Determined, he got back on his feet and attempted to land a punch, but before he could make contact, Naruko struck first, delivering a firm blow to his stomach. Kiba doubled over, clutching his abdomen in pain, only to be met with a swift kick to the face. The force spun him around, and before he could regain balance, Naruko struck the inside of his knee, sending him collapsing onto the ground. Look at that. Bowing before me already? She said with a smirk. You're nothing more than a pup trying to act tough. With one final punch, Kiba was rendered unconscious. Silence fell over the spectators as they processed what had just unfolded. This was the same student they had overlooked, the one who had always been underestimated and ridiculed. But deep down, they all knew, there had always been warnings about her. Fear crept into their expressions as they gazed at Naruko, her presence now more formidable than ever. Her intense eyes sent chills down their spines, and the shift in her demeanor unsettled them. Naruko, you need to calm down, came a cautious voice. Or what? she retorted. You'll glare at me again? Judge me like you always have? What exactly are you going to do about it? You know what? It doesn't matter. Because I know what I'm going to do. Clenching her fists, a red, fiery chakra began to swirl around her, gradually forming the shape of a kunai. She took slow, deliberate steps forward, her gaze locked onto Iruka, who stood frozen in place, overwhelmed by the intensity of the energy radiating from her. Just as she was about to take another step, a gentle yet firm hand rested on her shoulder. Naruko's head snapped around to see who had dared to intervene, only to meet the calm gaze of Sasuke. Naruko, Sasuke said softly. That's enough. This isn't who you are. Her voice was soothing, steady. She placed her hand on Naruko's cheek, gently rubbing the faint whisker marks with her thumb. Naruko's eyes fluttered shut for a brief moment as she leaned into the warmth of her friend's touch. Slowly, the crimson chakra dissipated, the tension in the air lifted, and her markings faded back to normal. There you are, Sasuke said with a gentle smile. Watching from a distance, Kakashi exhaled slightly. The third was right. She can bring her back to herself. Knowing he had to act fast, Kakashi swiftly teleported to the scene, appearing in the middle of the training grounds. Before anyone could react, he grabbed both Naruko and Sasuke and vanished in an instant. Hokage's office. Kakashi stood before Hiruzen, recounting the events that had just transpired. Behind him, Naruko and Sasuke remained silent. Sasuke, still holding onto Naruko's arm, seemed unwilling to let go. Kakashi stepped aside, allowing the Hokage to address them directly. Naruko, you've done well to maintain control these past few years, Hiruzen said, his tone composed but firm. This time, even in your anger, you did not take things too far. Your restraint shows growth. However, when faced with Iruka, you nearly lost control. I understand your frustration, and I can see why you reacted the way you did. But I want you to recognize something. Had it been a different voice in that moment, you might have calmed down on your own. Instead, you were met with words that only fueled your emotions. Naruko nodded, relieved that she wasn't in serious trouble. Sasuke, sensing the situation was not as dire as she had feared, loosened her grip slightly, visibly more at ease. Sasuke, Hiruzen continued, I'm proud of you for stepping forward and helping Naruko regain her composure. You handled the situation well. It's nothing, Sasuke replied with a small chuckle. I know she didn't mean for things to escalate. Sometimes, she just needs a reminder of who she really is. Hiruzen smiled at her words before his expression turned serious once more. With everything that happened today, I've made a decision. Effective immediately, the two of you will no longer be part of the academy. Both girls blinked in surprise. Huh? Naruko said. What? Sasuke echoed. Hiruzen chuckled, raising a hand to calm them. Let me finish. You two are officially Jonin now. You possess the necessary skills and knowledge. However, you won't be assigned missions just yet. You'll need to wait until the rest of your class graduates so we can form a proper 3-person team. Both of them let out a sigh of relief, prompting laughter from both Kakashi and Hiruzen. Kakashi will be your Jonin mentor, Hiruzen continued. With that, they officially became Jonin, receiving their Leaf Village headbands as a symbol of their new status as shinobi of Konoha. Dear YouTube family. That's all for now. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. I promise to keep bringing you fresh and exciting content. Best regards. Anime Dreams.